Hi there and welcome along to my Christmas card video. Today I'm going to show you how to just put together some really nice, simple but effective Christmas cards using vintage papers and vintage stamps and of a little bit of glitter as well. It is the festive season after all, why not add a little bit of glitter? This little tutorial coincides with a kit that's available on my Etsy shop. You don't have to buy this kit if you've got your own little vintage paper stash. This is just great as an inspiration video. This is by no means a tutorial on exactly how to make each of these cards. It's more geared up to be just something to give you a little bit of idea, on a little bit of an idea on how you can make things with various vintage papers from your stash. So the kits are available from my Etsy shop. I'll put the link with the YouTube video, or you can just use your own materials. The kit that I sell has everything included to make 4 cards. So you get 4 greetings card blanks that are the brown craft greetings card blanks with envelopes. You get some pre-hand stamped Christmas greetings as well. You get a little bit of sheet music, which is just hidden underneath there, and that's so you can tear and collage with. And then there's some really tiny little pieces, so I have put these bits in cello bags. I don't normally use a lot of plastics, but these are really some small items in here. So we've got some die cut luggage labels in sheet music and in gold, vintage stamps, a little bit of lace trim. You get a metre of embroidery cotton in there as well, 6-stranded cotton, 4 little buttons, so 1 for each card if you want to use them, and then lots of little holly and star die cuts as well. So there's plenty there for 4 cards, and you might find there's a little bit extra as well. So those are the kits that I do sell to go with these, but I'll just pop that to one side for now and we can talk a little bit more about these cards. Now, I always collect lots of vintage paper ephemera, which isn't necessarily Christmassy, but I did come across some vintage Christmas stamps a little while ago, and I just think that kind of pairing really makes for quite a nice collaged Christmas card, and with a little bit of gold glitter in it as well, it makes it just that little bit more festive. So just to talk through these ones really quickly, you can see they're just collaged down. Some of them are very neat. This one's very angular. Everything's at right angles. It's all collaged down very neatly. And it's got a little bit of cross stitch on here, just on the back, just behind that stamp there, and the button's stitched on. You've got something where you've got a torn edge like this one, which just makes that collage a little bit softer. So sometimes it's nice to have the contrast between the torn edge and the actual die cut shape. And again, this button here is just tied on. And then this is a little bit of a mixture of the two. So you've got the die cut shapes and the straight edges, but you've got a little piece of lace just running up the back there as well, just to soften the edges. And they're all just glued down with a little bit of Pritt stick. And then they're all secured in place onto the card with some tacky glue. Now, I really like to use this glue. Normal PVA glue is absolutely fine, but tacky glue is already quite thick. Tacky glue is quite thick already. It's almost, if you imagine, like half-dried PVA glue. So it doesn't get your work really wet, but it's got a really good adhesion. It can stick a whole bunch of craft things down, and it's not very expensive either. It comes in a range of different size bottles, and you can see it's really well used, this one. It's got a really fine nozzle as well, for really sort of fine craft work. So that's kind of my recommendation, I guess, is it's the Anita's tacky glue. And I just get that at the range quite often because it's quite cheap there. You can get the smallest bottles for £1, I think. So that's what I used to stick my collages down with. If you wanted to do this at home and you've got paper cuts, then you can use things like paper punches to create star shapes and holly shapes. So these are just paper punches that you slide your paper into, punch them down, and then you can create the little cut shapes that you see on these cards. The other thing which is quite useful to have as well are some alphabet stamps. This is my little kit here. I only have lowercase letters, which actually I quite like because it just makes, I don't know, it just makes it really quite sort of naive and sweet for little Christmas card makes. And a couple of different inks as well, which I just wanted to mention. When you stamp with these inks and these little letters, let me just move those out of the way for a moment. All you have to do is very gently tap your letter into the ink and then just gently press it down. You don't have to press it really hard. If you press it really hard, you'll get the square around it. You might like that effect, so have a play around if you've got your own alphabet stamps and see what sort of effect you like. What you don't have to do really is squash your stamp right into the ink. Just tap it gently, or even better, just pick your ink pad up and just tap it against it like that, and then you know you can't kind of overload your stamp and overcharge it. These ones here are quite nice ones because they don't get too wet, so you can't get kind of big globs of ink on anything that, you know, can be smudged and run all over the place. And they do come in a wide range of colours as well. I should say, I'm not trying to advertise anything deliberately here. This is just kind of from my own experience. This one, I think it's the Dovecraft one, it's really lovely pigment, but the ink is quite wet. So with these ones, don't squash your letters in too far, because then you will really overcharge the stamp. So just tapping against the pad really gently, and then just pressing it down really gently as well. So this one you can see is a lot more of a, it's much more sort of wetter ink. So if I was to really press down, you're more likely to smudge with that ink than the other one. But actually it gives you a lovely colour if you can just charge your stamp up just enough. And you don't get too much ink on the end of that letter stamp. So they're the couple of kind of readily available ink pads that you can get anywhere that I like to use with my alphabet stamps. So moving on, I thought I'd just demonstrate how I typically put one of these collage cards together. I've already kind of created an idea for this one, so I'm not spending too long trying to figure out how it's going to look. That is the nice part of collage, I think, is just gathering a lot of materials together and then playing around with how you're going to arrange them on the card. Sometimes when I'm making cards, what I do is I'll lay 4 or 5 blanks out at one time, and I kind of do lots of little collages before anything gets glued down, and just sort of play with all the composition and trims and things before anything gets stuck down permanently, because I think sometimes the faffing about is actually the nice part of collage. It's just the arranging and just seeing how things look. Now, all the letters I've done in my kit have been stamped onto the blank part of vintage sheet music. So it's a nice sort of vintagey beige colour. It'll match up well with all the other things in the kit. And it's really soft as well. The ink, because I think the papers, because the papers are so old, they've sort of absorbed the ink quite softly as well. So it's got quite a soft edge there on the text. So I kind of came up with this last night. This is going to be my collage. I've got a little piece of lace. I've got a vintage sheet music label. I've got a little stamp over the top of that, and I'm going to finish it off with just a little heart button just here, like that. So that's going to be my collage for a nice simple card. Now, you can glue everything down straight away, and if you want to add any stitch into it, you can just go for it. The only thing I would say is that if you do glue down and stitch afterwards, when you open up your card, you're going to have stitching on the inside of your card. So what I tend to do is I stick smaller elements together and then stitch them, and then when all the stitching's done, I glue the whole thing down so that there's lovely stitching on the card, but you've still got 2 sides to write on if you want to when you send your card. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just pop a little bit of stitching around that tag. I'm going to use 6-stranded embroidery cotton. Again, if you get the kits, you get 1 metre of this in with the kits. And that's quite a lot for cards really, because it's made from 6 strands, so you can split it. So I'm just going to fray the edges. Mine have only got 4 here because I've already taken 2 strands out to make my other card samples. But if you just fray 6-stranded cotton, it's easy to pull a few strands apart. So I usually use 2 for cards and sewing. So if you just fray it and pull one straight out, lay it down, pull the next one straight out, you'll find that's easier than trying to pull the embroidery cotton apart. And it doesn't cause a knot either, because that sometimes can be quite frustrating with 6-stranded cotton when you try and split the threads. So I'm just going to thread my needle. Now, the nice thing about doing stitching on paper is that you don't have to worry about putting knots and things on the back of your work, because you can just add a little bit of glue at the end and glue the ends down. So I'm just going to bring my hands into the centre here so you can see. So I'm going to just do some stitches over the edge here. And when I come through the back of this here, I'm just going to hold down that bit of thread. So I'm not worrying about a knot. I'm just going to hold it down. And when I come to glue this piece down onto the card, I'll pop a little bit of glue over that loose edge. And then that shouldn't come loose. So I'm just going to do some little bits of overstitching here. I think groups of 3 look really good, or groups of odd numbers always seem to look quite nice on things. So I don't go right round the edge usually. But as I say, this is just an ideas video. It's not kind of, you know, don't feel like you have to do exactly as I'm doing. The idea is it just shows you different ways you can use all of these little bits and pieces that you have either in the kit or lying around in your stash. So just a few little stitches down the side there. Can you see now if that's just been caught in with the stitches, all I'm going to do is just run my needle up the back of those stitches like that. Snip that off. So all the threads are behind the paper and that can be glued down in just a little bit. They're my paper scissors, so they're not as sharp as the fabric ones. And then I think I might change where the button goes. I might put the button in the bottom corner. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches here on this side. Again, I'm just going to catch that at the back and go over. Whoops, I just pulled it out. Well done. So I'll hold that. Push that in there. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And the last thing I'm going to do, just keeping the thread in the paper still, is I'm just going to bring the needle up and I'm going to sew the button on in this corner here. So if I just hold it there, I can push the needle straight through a couple of times. You don't get a needle in the kits that I supply. It is just paper kits, so you would need to have your own your own needle, scissors and glues as well. But as I say, there's enough in the kits to make 4 cards. So that's the needle stitched on, the button stitched on. I'm going to just loop that through there and snip that off. The next thing I'm going to do is just pop a little bit of glue on the back and then glue it in place on top of that card. Okay, so that's that card done. You can see that the glue is set it just nicely over the fabric. If you ever find that you're gluing something down and it immediately sort of pings up off the thicker thing that you're gluing it over, just give it a few minutes, let the glue go off a little bit so it starts to set and gets really tacky, and then go back and press it into place. And you'll probably find once the glue's had a bit of time to get some air to it and dry off a bit, that it adheres better when it's going on top of something that's quite a lumpy surface. If you're using any kind of PVA as well, your glue will dry quite clear. So if you do get the odd little bit underneath a piece of crochet, I've just got a little bit there, that won't be able to be seen once it's dry as well. And those are my cards. So they are really quick. You can see how quickly I could put that one together. I think the thing that's time consuming and really I find enjoyable is getting all of the, collecting all of your bits and pieces together, all of your fabrics and threads and buttons and stamps, and then actually snipping them and cutting them, playing around with them, and seeing how you can lay out that composition. So some of them have just got one words on them, some of them are a bit longer, some are very angular, everything's very neat. Some of them we've got nice soft edges where we've torn up bits of paper as well. There's no right or wrong way to do it really. As I say, the nice part is just enjoying the time to play around with a little bit of collage and composition. So if you've got your own craft stash, then enjoy. If not, I've got little kits on Etsy, which would give you the materials to make 4 cards with envelopes, and probably have a little bit spare as well. The only thing I would say, one last point, is that if you are going to sew buttons onto your cards, it's entirely optional. They're in the kits, but you don't have to include them. Just be mindful that if a button is on a card, it's probably going to become a large letter first class stamp, because it just makes your card a little bit thicker, so it'll just push it over the threshold for a regular first class stamp in the UK, and you'll have to send it large letter. So that's just something to bear in mind, so just so nothing gets lost in the post if it's got lovely buttons and things on. And that's the end of my video. If you've got any questions, just leave something in the comments. As I say, I'll put my Etsy link up as well so you can find out where the kits are. But I hope you found it inspiring and maybe giving you some ideas to make your own cards at home. Thanks for watching.